would love to introduce to you one of my favorite members and a person that is pretty much responsible for being on the team that made this place happen. For the countless years that this discussion and dialogue that was going on in terms of making a place in Marin, a place where media, community media could happen, not under the realm of government or private organization, more or less under a nonprofit, which is what we're standing in right now, as this organization has been visioned and missioned and dedicated by yours truly, Ed Dudkowski. Everyone give your round of applause.
Thanks, Lizzie. Thank you all for coming, and I want to let you know that I'm honored to have Professor Herb Zettel here, who's my directing an aesthetics professor at San Francisco State a few years back, and who's probably the foremost publisher, author of broadcasting textbooks in the world, and lives here in Marin County and came tonight. Thank you, Herb.
It's painful.
The topic of my talk tonight is the evolution of electronic field production from Philo T Farnsworth to the FlipCam. But because things happen so rapidly in this business, the title just changed this morning because the FlipCam is no longer the state of the art.
Nor is your remote.
No, it's my remote. Okay, we missed it. Anyway, what I had there was a slide that, I had earlier loaded a slide of the new iPad that has a front-loading camera, so now, there we go. Video conferencing. Does anyone know what that has to do with television? Back in 1920, a 14-year-old high school student was plowing a field in Idaho, a potato field. And he went back and forth, and he had previously been experimenting with batteries and electric motors and a little electricity as it was just developing in about 1920. And as he kept going back and forth, he realized that you could create a picture or an image by the way you could scan across rows and change the modulation. And he went back and drew a diagram, and that diagram, actually, that's a real diagram from his high school teacher who saved it all those years, and that was used in a trial, patent trial later in later years. He drew that diagram about the idea of electronically gathering images. And sure enough, his high school teacher looked at it and said, that would work. 5 years later, he was in a laboratory in San Francisco at Green and Sansom Street. He had, I think, $20,000 from two backers. And he started developing the first television, the first all-electronic television. It had been television in 1884, scanning electromagnetic, electromechanical devices. But the all-electronic, the pure electronic form of television wasn't demonstrated until 1927. I think it was either April or September 7th, 1927. It was actually, he made the first image. He demonstrated it to the press in 1928. And the first person to ever appear on television was his wife, who had her eyes closed because the lights were so bright. But they demonstrated to the press the image in 1928. That's probably one of the first cameras. And there's a tube in there called an image dissector tube. And there's Philo with his image dissector tube and the other tube for projecting the image. He had to develop both tubes. He had to learn glass blowing to create this thing, among other skills and talents. About that same time, the devil stepped in. RCA, David Sarnoff, sent a Russian scientist named Zworykin to come in and spend a little time at the lab on Green Street. He spent about a year there. The old farm boy from Idaho kind of showed him everything. The following year, RCA announced a television system. They couldn't demonstrate it, but they announced that they had it. Years later in a patent fight, Philo would, that was the, one of the early Zworykin cameras. Years later, Philo would win the patent battle, but it dragged on for a number of years. There's the building. You can go there on Columbus Street today. You can read that plaque, and you can see the dedication to Farnsworth that's there. And being in the Bay Area, we're so lucky to be here, where movies were invented, audio recording was invented, video recording was invented, electronic animation was invented, and television. And that's Pem Farnsworth, his widow. And she was there when that was dedicated. That picture's interesting because it was taken by, incidentally, by a photographer named Joseph J. Rosenthal in 1977. He's the same photographer that did that famous Iwo Jima flag raising shot. I'll tell a little anecdote here. I had the honor and privilege of meeting Pem Farnsworth about 1977. I had a little production studio in Mill Valley. We had a contract with Newsweek Feature Service to do weekly news features with a reporter who would come in. And I got a call one day saying, we've got a woman who lives in Stinson Beach coming in on 1 o'clock on Tuesday. Could you have a camera ready? And so I did, and I got the studio set up. This woman walks in with a cardboard box, and in it are something wrapped in towels. And she sets the box down on a table in my studio, and she picks this thing out of it, unwraps it, and hands this to me and says, "This is Phil's image dissector tube." And I'm standing in a concrete floor saying, "Don't drop it. Don't drop it." I handed it back to her. She put it away. They did the interview, and it was really exciting. And then a couple of weeks later, she called and said, "Ed, they're dedicating this to Phil. Why don't you come on down?" So I was there when they dedicated that. Philo used to say that Pem and I started TV. He always credited her with being there at the beginning together as they started television. There are stamps now dedicated to him. She went on a really big campaign to promote him as the inventor instead of RCA. I was driving from a fishing trip in Idaho, through Idaho one day, and I stopped at a stop sign, and I looked to my right, and I saw that. And I said, I gotta go in there and see what's in there. And sure enough, they had this cram-packed museum, and I did get a picture. I need to clean that up a little bit. And in there, of course, is an image dissector tube, and there's other tubes and some of the other stuff. And she had written that book, Distant Vision. I have a copy of that somewhere in storage. Essentially, from that time on, cameras, electronic cameras, were pretty much huge, cumbersome devices. And every one of those monitors was part of what was called a camera chain. That went into a rack about 6 feet high for each camera. That then went out to the camera. So that's about how portable they got. You had to have them in trucks. In 1939, David Sarnoff, probably? Yeah, David Sarnoff introduced NBC and RCA and introduced television at the World's Fair. About that same time,
The backstage
Paramount
preview of
released this
television,
about
the
the
newest
state of
miracle
the
of
art.
modern electrical engineering. Technicians in the Farnsworth Philadelphia laboratories have helped to make television, the dazzling dream of the decade, a practical reality today. Mr. Philo T Farnsworth, shown at the right, is working on the image dissector tube, a photoelectric camera tube of his own invention that distinguishes his system of television from others. It is said to be responsible for the most clearly defined television pictures. Placed in the circuit of this receiving system is a funnel-shaped cathode tube. The round, flat surface of its bulb becomes the picture screen in studio monitor sets, as well as in home receiving sets. The image dissector tube and the cathode oscillite tube are the heart and brain of the Farnsworth system. Television engineers are now adjusting studio equipment to demonstrate the technical routine of broadcasting a television program. Max Factor Jr. has developed a new type makeup for television photography. The photoelectronic camera, being super-sensitive to red, causes that color to be absorbed. Thus, red is applied to hollows and depressions of the face to eliminate heavy lines and also to produce highlights. While blue, which reproduces darkly, is used as eyeshadow. The facial makeup of the modern movie queen makes her a dream of loveliness, but the television star has the grotesque appearance of a circus clown. The new television makeup may give the camera a break, but the wearer's first view of herself is likely to break her heart, unless she has a sense of humor. In this camera is an image dissector tube. The camera lens picks up the artist as an image of light, causing electrodes in the dissector tube to emit electrons. Passing through station equipment, the electrons become radio impulses to be broadcast and picked up by receiving sets where the routine is reversed. The radio impulses becoming points of light that appear on the screen as pictures. 30 pictures are completed every second. These pictures are composed of 200,000 light points that strike the screen one at a time at the rate of 6 million points per second. Music and sound accompany the performer's action, both visible and audible elements going on the air in perfect synchronization. As the action is photographed from various angles, engineers at control boards select long shots and close-ups. editing the show as it passes instantly through the station's facility. Traveling with the speed of light through a maze of tubes and equipment, the show leaves the station's sending towers to be viewed by the television public, an audience as yet small and comparatively ignorant of the enormous research and experiment that makes it possible for us to see and hear people many miles away. We can even see the announcer, although that annoying necessity is still protected by distance. The camera swings round in the next act. While radio can portray the art of the ventriloquist, television makes it possible to witness the magician's sleight of hand from a distance for the first time. Silent, invisible, instantly, human speech, music, and appearance pervade the airways together, to be received in magic boxes for distant reproduction. It may not be long before news events and current world happenings will be witnessed in thousands of homes. Television may picture for those at home the work of far-off explorers, or it may reveal to military officials the details of distant maneuvers. The most fanciful dream of mankind is today a startling reality, destined to become the world's most popular science.
When I was a kid, I started modeling TV cameras in the basement of my house because I was fascinated by this medium. You can see that. It's the only picture I have. The upper at the left is one of the cameras. I had a turret lens on the front made out of toilet paper rolls. And I could look through the camera and see things. And I used to get my friends to try to get in front of the camera and play television. But on the other side of the basement, I had an electronics lab where I was experimenting with heat kits and building electronics and doing things. So tonight you can see the geek side of me, those of you that know me as a producer, director, writer. And about that era, when I was growing up, that was the most common television camera, and you can see the size of that thing and the bulk in there. I used to watch things, so I used to like shows that went outdoors. The Gary Moore show used to do it, a show called Arthur Godfrey used to go to Hawaii. Anytime the camera got out of the studio, I was totally fascinated by it, the electronic camera, not a film camera, I don't know why. Dave Garroway pioneered a program, well, of course, the Today Show. He was the first host of the Today Show in an outside audience like they do today. That's the state of the art of the cameras when I was in college. That's an RCA TK11, it's called an image orthicon camera. And that's me doing some directing, the same techniques that we use today back here in the control room. Ready, one, take one. Camera one, yeah, that's me, yeah. Yeah, that was me too. I still say, you're other right, you're other right. That summer when I was in San Bernardino, we built a remote truck. And that was for a government project to some job retraining. And that truck existed to have 2 black and white cameras and a 2-inch videotape recorder in it. And every night at the end of the shooting, we would roll that Ampex VR1100 back into the studio. We took the monitor bridge off, back in the studio. In the morning, we'd roll that back into the back of that truck, and we'd go out and shoot 2 switched cameras. The videotape came about in 1956. That's the original Ampex team, and on that team, if you notice there's an Emmy there, on that team was a guy named Ray Dolby. Everyone now knows of Dolby Laboratories. Ray Dolby designed the original audio system for the first video recorder. I discovered this tape that I did in 1981, and I thought I'd just play it for you tonight.
Stations presents the distinguished reporter and news analyst, Edwin R. Murrow, in See It Now, a document for television based on the week's news and told in the voices and faces that made the news. Edited by Mr. Murrow and Fred W. Friendly. A public service of the CBS television network. Now, speaking from the actual control room of Studio 41, is the editor of See It Now, Edwin R. Murrow.
This is an old team trying to learn a new trade. When we started this series of programs, we had to decide where to do it from. We decided to do it right here from the studio. My purpose will be not to get in your light any more than I can, to lean over the cameraman's shoulder occasionally and say a word which may help to illuminate or explain what is happening. We have here 2 monitors which will serve in effect the purpose of loudspeakers. They're tied, so to speak, to lines that come in from Chicago, New York, Washington, various other places. We will from time to time show film on those monitors as well. We are, as newcomers to this medium, rather impressed by the whole thing. Impressed, for example, that I can turn to Don Hewitt here and say, Don, will you push a button and bring in the Atlantic coast?
This is camera 1 at a point of vantage on Governor's Island. We're looking down into New York Bay on the Atlantic.
There you have the east coast of the United States. Now, on monitor 2, may we have the Pacific coast, please?
Hello, New York. This is the Golden Gate, the waters of San Francisco Bay leading out to the Pacific Ocean. It's rather hazy out here, Mr. Murrow.
That's fine, San Francisco. May we have the San Francisco Bay Bridge, please?
Okay.
Now, San Francisco, could you use what you call, I think, a zoom-R lens and close in on the bridge a little?
Roger.
We, for our part, are considerably impressed. For the first time, man has been able to sit at home and look at two oceans at the same time.
That was the state of the art of video technology just 30 years ago. One look at that RCA TK11 black and white studio camera, and it's easy to see why television didn't venture out of the studio very often. In the first two-thirds of video's history, from the early 1950s to the late 60s, electronic images from outside of the studio required armies of technicians and tons of equipment, not to mention hundreds of amps of electricity. Today, we take the MiniCam for granted. As we see images of Russian army troops in full color marching through the streets of Kabul, it's hard to imagine a time when it took almost the entire resources of a network, not to mention the phone company, to get black and white video images from one coast to the other. The lightweight, extremely portable, color television camera of today that we call the MiniCam didn't come overnight. It went through some very interesting evolutionary changes. Originally, all television cameras were designed for studio use. The heavy camera head itself was only a small part of the total package, then called a camera chain. 6-foot-high racks of tube-type equipment were necessary for signal processing and support for even the most rudimentary black and white pictures. Location shooting required turning a 40-foot truck trailer into a control room on wheels to cover any event outside the studio. When color arrived in the early 60s, not that much was different. Transistors began to replace tubes in rack assemblies, but the complexity of color video processing was such that any size and weight advantages of transistors was immediately overwhelmed by the more complex circuitry necessary for color transmission. And so color camera technology remained in the remote truck to be used, again, by armies of technicians. It was probably the American political system that played the most important role in the development of what we now refer to as the MiniCam revolution. Back in 1964, the networks had to find a way to follow reporters around on the floor of political conventions. The Norelco PCP-70, a monster of a 3-tube color camera, was developed. Camera operators were probably recruited from the ranks of professional football players to lug these early portable cameras around. And remember, this was only 15 years ago. The next convention saw a refinement in portable camera technology. The PCP-90 became the network's tool for coverage of the Presidential Nominating Convention of 1968. Both of these cameras, the PCP-70 and the PCP-90, had one major limitation. They both required a large camera cable to be linked to a very heavy camera control unit, which was necessary for signal processing even before the signal from that camera would be routed to a switcher or a VTR. True portable battery operation again required an ex-football player to operate the camera. And the price tag of either of these cameras was no small item either, in the $60,000 to $70,000 range. However, production companies and TV stations did see the possible application of a smaller production-type video camera, and both of these became the industry workhorses of their time. Color video images on location where heretofore remote vans feared to tread. In fact, one of the most successful video equipment service companies today was born out of the late 60s PCP-70 and PCP-90 camera technology, compact video. At that time, portable high-quality VTRs just barely existed. The Ampex VR3000 was a portable VTR if you considered 50 pounds of dead weight with a handle portable. However, TV stations such as our own KQED here in San Francisco pioneered location shooting without a remote truck, using what was then a black and white camera linked to a VR3000. The demand for portability was beginning. In 1972, I had the opportunity to develop an instant videotape news release service for the McGovern presidential bid in California. The requirements were speed, portability, and broadcast quality. Our goal was to record the candidate on location, giving a speech in the morning at various locations throughout the state, then duplicate up to 50 copies of excerpts of that speech on location for distribution immediately to TV stations for play that day. This was back in 1972. U-matic 3/4 inch did not exist as a broadcastable format then. 1 inch was just barely time-based correctable. And PCP-70 and PCP-90s were definitely out of our budget reach. We did accomplish the goal, and in doing so did one of the first MiniCam type of video coverages. With a modified Sony studio camera, at that time the smallest available reasonably priced color camera with broadcastable color pictures, we did several modifications. First was to remove the conventional back of the camera viewfinder. We then bought a Panasonic 1-inch TV receiver and converted it to a video monitor, placing it in the front of the camera right near the lens. With a custom-designed shoulder harness, we had our MiniCam. We still had to run the cable to a small CCU, then to an IVC 1-inch VTR. We would select a portion of the scene we wanted, dub it through an old analog type of time-based corrector, and record it onto a VR3000, where we even used film rewinds to cut the individual tapes for each station. It all fit nicely into a VW microbus, and it amazes me today that the whole thing held together for some 10 consecutive days of shooting. It wasn't until the fall of 1973 that the first commercially available MiniCam in the under $30,000 range became available. Hidden away in a quiet corner of the 1973 NAB convention in Washington, D.C. was a Japanese company called Asaka. They had on display a broadcast quality color camera with a camera head that weighed only 14 pounds and a backpack of 14 pounds. In 1974 and 75, I worked with the Asaka in Hawaii and Alaska and in the western United States, and it was exhilarating not to need a control room on wheels to shoot color video images almost anywhere. Simultaneously with the ACC 5000 from Asaka, CBS News was working with Ikegami developing a MiniCam. The HL33 came on the scene first as an experiment of CBS News with an East Coast unit and a West Coast unit. Incidentally, the HL in HL33 stood for the name Handy Looky, which was actually on the nameplate of the first CBS camera. The point to remember here is that those two model cameras were introduced to the world only 6 years ago. MiniCams are a very recent development in our video technology. RCA was next on the scene in the mid-70s with a totally self-contained color video camera, the TK76. This was probably the camera that revolutionized TV news and electronic field production. The TK76 immediately became the workhorse of the television industry at the station level. It also made possible the tremendous growth of independent production. Finally, when coupled with the equally rapidly developing video cassette technology, true film-style video production was possible. A two-person team could now go out and shoot video images almost as portably as film. The days of remote trucks were finally over. Since the TK76, there have been refinements and developments by over a dozen manufacturers making high quality and portability much easier. In less than 5 years, MiniCam technology has changed the fabric of television news gathering and created a whole new industry of electronic field production. To any student of the future distribution technology, it is readily apparent that the MiniCam revolution of the late 70s is the forerunner of the communications revolution of the 80s. For only with the higher quality, less expensive, and more portable image gathering technology are we going to be able to feed the ferocious appetite of the distribution challenges ahead: satellites, cable TV, home cassettes, and discs. This technology is creating a demand for programming unequaled in the history of the television medium. Now that we're inundated by VHS, Beta, DiscoVision, U-matic, 1-inch, quad, computers, digital effects, handheld cameras, frame synchronizers, noise reduction, electronic still store, and on and on and on, well, maybe now it's a good time to pause for a moment and reflect on the words of a communicator spoken more than 30 years ago when he came face to face with the new technology.
We're impressed with the importance of this medium. We shall hope to learn to use it and not to abuse it. Good afternoon and good luck.
Yeah, I got a little press from that thing. It was kind of fun. The New York Times called it a major political weapon. And the Nixon dirty tricksters came after me and threatened that if I tried to sell it to the national campaign, I'd never work in TV again. That's a badge of honor as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
this is one of the first ways that video was edited, and that's a splicing block with a microscope, and what it consisted of was you ran the video in there. It also had some solution, iron oxide solution particles suspended in alcohol, and some mylar tape, and you ran the tape through there carefully and looked for 2 pulses after you've developed it with the solution, and then you used a guillotine to cut it, and then you put the mylar tape and smoothed it out, put it back in the machine again, and tried to see if it didn't roll when you made the edit. It was a challenge. First splice I ever did in video was one on one of these. CBS used to bring when I was working at KPIX years ago, CBS used to bring an editor out from New York for the NFL football game, and they would hire a machine from KPIX in the tape room, and this guy would fly out with his splicing block paid for in the second seat. He'd get set up in the tape room in front of the machine and would splice the halftime show and the postgame show together so they could air them at that point, physically. And the movie and the TV series Laugh-In was also physically hand edited like this. That's what we looked like when we were portable back in 1974. That's me on the left, and that's my partner Harry Mathias on the right. That's a VR3000. These were 20-minute load 2-inch tapes. That was the battery pack. And I think you could get maybe 3 20-minute loads out of a battery if you were lucky. The first really large-scale 1-inch machine came along, and it was from a company down the peninsula called IVC. And I picked that model out particularly because it may be because of that machine that we have a media center here today. IVC, the company that manufactured it, was trying to come up with something that was smaller than 2-inch. They came out with this machine. They realized that there was a market among cable TV systems around the country. So their marketing people went crazy selling local origination studios, which then spawned the whole concept of PEG, and eventually became probably the machine that drove the media center here today. Eventually it faded out. There have been 60 different formats at least of videotape, and now it's obsolete. The stack I have here has most of the most popular formats, stepping up from 2-inch on the bottom all the way up to a memory stick on the top. To me, that's a really interesting evolutionary picture. The camera that I worked with in college, black and white, the middle section of my middle part of my career, and then most recently going out with a little small A1U that's fully HD and is a pure pleasure to shoot with. Cameras went through evolutions. There's a Betacam. That's I think a Digibeta. There's a DV cam. This was the pioneer of the small mini DVs that we used to use last year around here. We still use a little bit today. And there's a camera you're using currently today that Richie's shooting with. These are actually shown in catalogs now as prosumer camcorders. Probably there may be an audio input that you can get external that makes it a prosumer. And of course now we all know that the state of the art these days in cameras are, well, the FlipCam. Everybody reach in and take out your cell phone for a second. And just hold it up. We're all videographers these days. It really is insidious. It's amazing what's happened to this industry. What happened? Oh, I'm going to pause this for a second. When I started seeing a lot of the cameras getting smaller and smaller and smaller in about the year 2000, I got interested in doing multi-camera shooting again without a truck. I don't know, I don't like vehicles with equipment attached to them. I was trying to get rid of the truck all this time, then and most recently now. In 2000, I had an idea for a switcher in a suitcase, and this is a video that we showed at the NAB in 2002, and I'll tell you more about it afterwards.
Jill Prescott's public television series, École de Cuisine, is seen on more than 100 stations nationwide. Charlie White is a 25-year broadcast veteran director.
Ready, one, and take one. One's up. You know, we had a big 48-foot truck before. Now we have a 24-inch suitcase. Okay, I'd rather have the suitcase, believe me. Okay, ready? Take two.
Introducing the PicsBox, the only plug-and-play live video editor. All the essential functions of a broadcast television control room in a small suitcase-sized package. At about 25 pounds, this new revolutionary TV production tool features a 17-inch high-resolution color LCD to show up to 8 source inputs, as well as preview and program monitors on one screen at the same time. The preview and program monitors can instantly zoom to full screen without affecting the output signal for critical live editing directorial judgments. Time-based corrected switching allows a mixture of consumer, prosumer, and professional cameras to be intercut with plug-and-play compatibility from either composite video, S-video, or FireWire. Bright LEDs ensure proper audio levels. This unit meets RS-178 broadcast specifications for complete professional quality.
Okay, we're getting some good video out of there. The audio sounds good too. It's really working. It's really working very well.
The PicsBox includes an 8-station 2-channel PL intercom system, so the director has complete communication with camera operators. Also included is PicsTally, a proprietary LED tally system built into the PL belt packs and mic boom to indicate when camera positions are live. The PicsBox is perfect for webcasting, cablecasting, and/or video recording live school sports events, local government and community meetings, seminars, lectures, entertainment venues, hotel AV departments, recording studio sessions, church services, and all multiple camera live one-time only events. A patent is pending. The PicsBox from Creation Technologies, making television content creation easier.
This is a great product.
They had a picture back at the cooking school of the year before of the truck that they had done that same shoot with. And she showed it to me. She took the picture because the truck actually got a parking ticket. So I added the PicsBox in there, and it gives you really a dramatic representation of the difference. We could have produced exactly the same look that they produced out of that truck with the PicsBox if we'd gone through and done a complete shoot with prepped food and the whole thing with it. And so I'm kind of close a little bit with us to reflect a bit on what the power of television is. And to me, one of the biggest powers of television is it allows us to extend our vision as species infinitely into space and time too. And we can, shift time also. I think as the planet begins to realize that we are just this one single beautiful ball in space, we're getting a lot of that imagery through television. And it's a pretty powerful medium. And so I'm going to end up with one last bit of advice and word from someone we heard from earlier, and then I'm going to unveil a couple of these things here and I'll talk about them. Just because your voice reaches halfway around the world doesn't mean you're any wiser than reached only to the end of the bar. All of us in this room have to remember that when we're producing our media. Thank you. So in 1973, I went to the back of the NAB in Washington, and there was a camera under there that was self-contained with a backpack, and I put an order in for it then. They weren't going to deliver it until September. This was in March. And it was a $30,000 item. I didn't have any financing. I figured I'll figure out in 6 months how to finance it and get some investors. And so we got a call one day from F&B Seco in Los Angeles saying, the cameras are here. There's 6 cameras. So my partner and I flew down to Los Angeles. We flew back to San Francisco, and we came back with this. And this is the power supply for it. And there's the battery pack for it. And if you come a little closer later and be careful, there's one of the 3 pickup tubes that's in the camera head. That's called a Kalnikon tube. This is small. Big camera tubes in the old days in the 50s were like that. It also had a backpack, as you saw in the video. And at least every setup, if not twice a day, you had to use a very special tool to go in and align the registration and the shading on the camera. And that was a very important tool that every TV engineer back then knew, which is called a greenie. And you'd go in and adjust this to a monitor and then adjust some of the other controls to an oscilloscope, and you'd balance it all out. then you'd be ready to strap it on your back and go shooting. Now what were you shooting with? Here was the camera. It's quite different than the camera Richard shoots today. It's gone through a fabulous evolution. You're welcome to come up later and take a look at it. Here's the, I brought this in today. Here's the original hand-built PicsBox that I built as a prototype that actually did work at one time. And you can look inside and see all the hand wiring. And I took it down to Burbank and we made 6 production units. And this is one of the first production units of it. And again, you're welcome to take a look at that. So I think that's pretty much it.
Can you tell us the story of what happened with the PicsBox?
Well, Sony came out with a thing called the Anycast about 3 years later after I filed patents. And they violated 11 out of our 12 claims. And so I had an attorney who thought he could raise a lot of money from Sony. And we threatened an infringement action and we settled out of court for a lot less than I was told I was going to settle for when I met the attorney the first time. So I learned a big lesson about inventing. But it was a fascinating invention. I'm honored that of all companies on the planet to knock me off, it happened to be Sony. Not bad.
So, didn't you talk about actually demonstrating the weight?
Well, I realized that, yeah, if somebody wants to pick this up, I don't have the backpack straps to put it on.
Okay.
But if you want to come over here and pick up the battery phone.
All right, this is the pass-around tool.
Okay, any questions? Does anybody have any questions?
These are always very stylish. Protest in New York. You're very important. Call 911.
Yeah. So it's a dangerous tool.
What are you playing here?
It's like and then you have a bandolier.
You got belts?
I got belts.
Okay, now let's get here.
No, I don't want to go there. I'm too old for that now.
This thing is heavy.
Oh my God. So then you put this on your back too?
Yeah. I didn't bring the cable, but there's a camera cable that goes from the camera to
Let's just see
there.
what this is. Little heat vents. Little feature of a
I
heat
paid my
vent.
dues.
TV stripes.
Yeah.
Put it down, okay.
Yeah, right.
I like that vision.
Yeah.
That's great.
So, any other questions? Any questions? Well, thank you very much for
I have a
coming.
question.
Yes.
In terms of the formats, I mean, one of the challenges I've had in video is like all the different formats still, even now, even in digital, there's like, seems like 50 different formats and trying to, match and balance and get something from this format to that format. Do you think there's ever going to be a time when there's one format or some kind of standard?
There's going to be more.
It's going to broaden even more.
There's going to be more.
Interesting.
And you're doing it all in software. We, to convert all this stuff inner format. I did some of the early inner format editing too.
Yeah,
We're editing from 1 inch to 2 inch, and now it's just going to get more complicated.
And can you tell me, what were some of your specialties? I know when I first met you on your website, if you were to go there, eddudkowski.com, is that right? What are some of the things you focus on in terms of your career in TV? And I know you did informational.
I started out at Channel 4 as a news writer, right out of San Francisco State. And I worked there as a news writer. I went to Channel 2 and I was an assignment editor. Then I came back to Channel 5 and I was an assignment editor, news writer, producer. And I was a producer there for 2 different periods. For about 5 years I worked in TV news right out of college. Had nothing to do with technical stuff at all. And then I left TV news when I got an opportunity to do the McGovern campaign. I gave them 1 hour's notice. I had just been appointed to be the election producer for that year, for that election coming up. And I walked in the news director's office, I gave him 1 hour notice, and I flew down to Los Angeles. We had already gotten an approval to do the McGovern campaign. And I figured out, we'll see what happens after that. And after that, I ended up starting Location Video Services, a company in San Francisco that did a variety of things. We shot in Hawaii, Alaska, all over the West. I found another reel that has a lot of our samples from back then. It's really fascinating. And then, we did Theractin commercials in Las Vegas. They said we did the first nationally televised video commercial in Las Vegas. I don't know how we can prove that, but I guess we did. And then started my own company in and second company about 74 with my ex-wife, and we had a partnership for about 16 years, and we did everything from tourism promotional videos for the city of Reading to high-tech videos for Intel to major training projects for IBM. When they came out with the PC, our company was selected to do an 8-hour training series to teach teachers how to use the PC in education. We then 3 years later got another 8.5-hour training package out of IBM National Atlanta to do a training series to teach a K1 writing and reading program. I've done everything except sports. Fly fishing, but that's the closest. But most everything else I've had, you know, I just love the medium. I love every aspect of it, and I've done almost every job there is to do in it. And
yeah, what's the biggest change you've seen throughout your career regarding television?
I think the speed that it became so widespread to the point that we all now have video cameras in our cell phones. I mean, everyone is a videographer today, and it's the speed at which they have. You know, television is only 85 years old. From the time Philo T Farnsworth showed that crazy little one line, which was the first thing he showed, and a year later showed Pim on camera, it's been 84 years. It's not even 100 years. That's been the biggest thing, is the change, the evolution, the speed at which it's happened. I think the ability to be able to extend our vision is such a phenomenal ability that it's not surprising that it's driven so hard to me. Because when you think about what it can, you know, what we see. But that's been the biggest thing.
That Farnsworth film was in color.
Yeah, I know, that was a Paramount news release thing, and they colorized it. Yeah, it was for theaters, it was faked. But the actual Farnsworth stuff, I think, you know, it looked like normal B-roll.
Tell us a couple of the most interesting stories you covered over the years.
Harris and I covered the People's Temple story for CNN here, not down in Guyana, but locally in Berkeley and in San Francisco years ago. The Hearst Mansion, when we had that camera, about 2 days after Patty Hearst was kidnapped, we got a call from KGO, and they wanted us to go down to Hillsborough and stake out Randy Hearst. CBS had an Ikigami, experimentally HL33. We had our camera. ABC had a big studio camera. And for 3 months, we were in a tree, plugged into a tree virtually. It was probably the first stakeout coverage that ever happened, live stakeout coverage, where we were just down there, and whenever something happened, we'd go on. Because there's no other place you could report waiting for Patty Hearst, this woman who was kidnapped, except at her parents' house. And Randy, being a newspaper guy, would come out in the afternoon and give a press conference every afternoon about 3 o'clock, and we'd cover it. It was kind of exciting. There was one day when, for some reason, we were the pool camera, and the entire country was gen-locked to that camera, meaning all the synchronization pulses were all locked to it. So that was kind of fun. Those are the two that really come to mind right now. There's a lot of fun experiences. You know, it's got me to Europe several times shooting food and travel. Somebody's got to do it.
So, first I just want to thank you, because it's a rare treat to have someone with so much history unfolded. But on a more personal basis, I mean, do you find working now more rewarding? I know you're incredibly active. You're producing all sorts of things.
I love working now. I love creating. What I said in the newspaper, the Summerfeld Pointer interviewed me Monday for a thing that's out today, and I said, I love the ability to come into here and have an idea in your mind and be able to make it happen without trying to go out and find a sponsor and look for budgets or convince a program director or go through all the crap you have to go through. And I also like the idea that video has finally become a craft. It really has become a craft. When I started, you needed a team. You still need a team to do studio work, but really, in essence, every single one of us here could go out and get a camera, shoot a bunch of footage, put it together on Final Cut Pro, and create it as a craft. And to me, that's one of the most rewarding aspects of the business today, is that we can do that. And we can do it at every level. And that's why this center is so exciting, because we're really doing it here. There's just a tremendous amount of creativity around.
Where do you see television heading? Think it's going to be around a while?
I think so. I think so. You know, today what Apple announced, you know, is the true video conferencing or video, or the video phone that we've all heard about for years and years and years.
Dick Tracy's here.
Yeah. I think there's a, I went to the Apple website today and see if I can find it. There's a nice little slide. And I guess I can't. How do I get out of this?
Here, want me to get you want to get the
Yeah, I want to get to the desktop.
Yeah, yeah. And we'll just,
Oh, okay. Yeah, there we go. Just,
and then you want to get the internet?
no.
Oh.
There's a picture I have on the desktop.
Oh, okay,
I just want to grab it. Yeah, just, okay. So this is what's on Apple's website today.
Today, huh?
Let's see if it'll open.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
Picture within a picture?
Well, it's the ability to talk to each other and see yourself and the other person on an iPad.
Yeah.
And that's pretty phenomenal.
Well, you can't do it on the iPhone with FaceTime already?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is FaceTime for this.
It's
iPad.
FaceTime.
Yeah.
It's the same as we already have it on.
Now it's on
Okay.
iPad.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. They're going to sell 1 million of those. Anyway,
Really? So what's your take on the mix of television versus YouTube?
it's wonderful.
I mean, YouTube is like where it's happening. I mean, people watch YouTube for television now.
Yeah, it's wonderful. You know, it's
People's TV.
yeah, you know, one medium never really replaces another. It finds its niche. I mean, TV didn't replace radio. Newspaper, you know, look at it. One medium never replaces another. It spreads, it changes, it morphs, it expands. Most of the time it expands. When TV came out, it was radio is going to disappear, and radio is bigger today than it ever was in the world. Same thing. I mean, you know, we're just going to have this proliferation of everything. I used to, years ago, call it the democratization of television, because it really, you know, allows everyone the ability to create and get their ideas out. And if your ideas are sound and a lot of people like them, it'll work. And if they don't, they'll reject them, and that's kind of how it all works.
Yeah.
Or you'll have a bunch of special interest people that will like your special interest and follow you, or follow your channel on YouTube, or something like that. Especially now the proliferation of video on Facebook. You know, being able to just record as Lindsay does quite often. Just a message, you put it up there, and bang, it's there. So.
Can media save the world?
I'm hoping it. I'm hoping what's happening in the Middle East right now is the result of media. It's a result of being able to see ourselves and see others. Somewhere around 1990, I think it was, Ted Koppel did a fabulous 1-hour special on Nightline, or it was a special actually, and he talked about the MiniCam revolution as being responsible for the fall of the Berlin Wall and for Solidarity taking off, and he traced it back to how people were doing videos and trading them in church basements and letting people know what was going around in the country. And was basically saying it was a result of portable cameras, the ability to see ourselves, that tore down the Soviet Union and started with Poland. And now we're seeing it happening again, once again in the Middle East. We may be seeing it in Wisconsin, who knows?
Yeah.
But at least we're able to see what's going on. Even though it gets filtered sometimes, we still have a greater ability than we ever had before. We really do, and it just keeps getting more. So I hope it'll save the world, I really do. Something's got to. I think that view of the world is going to help to save the world. When the entire planet has that consciousness that we are floating in space and that we are this delicate little beautiful planet, I think when that consciousness starts to pervade everything, then we will, you know, have a different approach.
And what shows are you working on right now?
I made a list for the newspaper article, and I had about a dozen things I've done in the past year or so in planning, and the only one they used was the medical marijuana show. So we're doing a show with Lynette Shaw, who has had the most successful, long-running, longest-standing medical marijuana dispensary in the country in Fairfax. She's had it for 12 years, 2.5 years before Prop 215 was started. She's a very colorful character and has a service dog with her all the time, who's our co-host. And we have both music, and we have opinions, and we have interviews, and we have some growing tips from Ed Rosenthal, and we have some cooking tips from Aunt Sandy, and we have some legal advice, and so we brought Dr. Hip back to give us some medical advice, and we play some blues that she sings from either Smiley's and Polina's or the Whiskey A Go-Go in Los Angeles. And at the end, we play David Zacharin's game Tongue Twister, which is a great little card game that my friend has invented. So if you go online and look at tonguetwistergame.com, give a plug for you. So that's kind of what I'm working on now. That show and also some stuff with the Marin Women's Hall of Fame. I just did something for the League of Women Voters.
Still my concert next week.
Yeah, that's right. Next week we're going to shoot Bodie's concert.
Forgiveness Day.
And
Forgiveness Day, yeah.
Forgiveness Day in August, and more interviews with the Women's Hall of Fame, and I've got a couple of other shoots coming up.
Can you also just briefly on the farmers, the flash mob?
Oh, I've got another project that led me into a thing. We did a flash mob that's on my website. It's on farmersmarket.org. Yeah, it's on the channel.
What's your website?
Edudkowski.com. And I'll give you a card after if you want to look at it. And YouTube is Ed Dudkowski. And I've got about 90 videos on YouTube. So they're kind of fun. Everything from Safeway commercials 20 years ago to stuff now.
Seniors for Peace.
Yeah, Seniors for Peace at the Redwoods. I'm doing that on an ongoing basis too. Doing some stuff that they're doing. So I just love doing it, and it's fun. And you know, I was on a committee for 9 years on the MAC committee, the Media Access Advisory Committee, that helped advise the MTA to guide us into this nonprofit. And then they disbanded the committee when it worked, when it got funded. And I said, you know, do I want to try to get on another committee somewhere, or why don't I just come in here and play? And I've had more damn fun doing that than anything else. And so, heck with committees. Let's just make television.
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 Yeah, I like to tell people I was in video before it was video, when it used to be television. Anything else? 8 o'clock.
Perfect.
Welcome.